Want to say greetings to everyone on our outreach and those that might be watching this live and those that may be watching it months from now on YouTube. Want to welcome you all to services today. And what we're going to do, I've been working on a series on the book of Romans. And today I'm going to try to get myself through 3 chapters just to make things work right. And so this is part 4, and we're going to be doing Romans chapter 9 through 11. And I've got to give a little bit of a preface, but not much. So, you know, we've been going over this for the last, this is what, month 4, I guess, actually, really, for me. I do this once a month. And so I want to get really right into the point of many, if not most, Christians that worship on Sunday, for instance, believe that Paul in his writings, primarily the epistles to the Romans and also the epistle to Galatians, somehow indicate that the Torah, or the law, the Old Testament, the laws that are in the Old Testament have been done away with, or just really not relevant any longer, and that they've been replaced with faith in Jesus, if you will. We don't use that name particularly. And all that there is necessary for salvation. And they believe that Yahshua, or Jesus, fulfilled the law according to Matthew 5:17, and that he fulfilled the Torah, and so the law of Yahweh is just basically no longer relevant. It's not a requirement for salvation, and in fact nothing could be further from the truth. So in the past studies of part 1, 2, and 3, we've seen that this is just not true in any way, shape, or form. So the first thing Yahshua said in Matthew 5:17 is, think not. This was the first part of it. Think not that I've come to destroy the law of the prophets. So the exact opposite of what so many people out there in religion believe and teach is not so. And Paul, he had written the assembly in Rome, which is consisted of both Jews of their Jewish tradition, if you will, in the past, and Gentile converts, which both had really come to understand that Yahshua was the Messiah. And it's necessary to realize that there was no such thing as a New Testament for literally centuries after Paul's death. He wrote these letters, and they worked their way into what they call a canon, but there was a long period of time separated before there was ever anything other than the Scriptures, which is the Old Testament. So with that as kind of a preface, I want to get into chapter 9 then. And some of this will go slow at the beginning, but I've got a lot of things to say as we move along. We'll get to the hot topics or subjects that he's talking about. So in verse 1 of chapter 9, he says, I tell the truth in Messiah, and I'm not lying. My conscience testifying with me in the Holy Spirit, that I have great sorrow and unceasing pain in my heart, for I could wish that I myself were accursed from Messiah for my brother's sake and my relatives according to the flesh. Now, I think all you got to do is put 2 and 2 together. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was a Jew by religion. So continuing, who are Israelites? Who is the adoption and the glory and the covenants, the giving of the Torah, the service and the promises, of whom are the fathers, from whom is Messiah, according to the flesh, who is over all, Yahweh, blessed forever. Amen, he said. Verse 6, But it is not as though the word of Yahweh has come to nothing. For they are not Israel that are kept, that are of Israel. In other words, let me repeat that. For they are not all Israel that are of Israel. So I want really for you to keep this in mind as we go along. I've got some things I'm going to hit on this. So they're not all Israel that are as of Israel. Can't get my mouth to function. Okay, verse number 7. Neither, because they are Abraham's seed, are they all children, but in Isaac your seed will be called. That is, it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of Yahweh, but the children of the promise are counted as seed. So notice that Paul calls these children of Yahweh, and we know from the Gospels that when we will be born a second time in the future into a different state of being, basically spirit beings in the likeness of Yahshua. And that's kind of an amazing thing to even get your head around it, that the being in a likeness of Yahshua himself. Thinking about his resurrection and the fact that he has gone back to the Father. And we'll cover some of this later. Verse 9, for this is a word of promise. At the appointed time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. Not only so, but Rebekah also conceived by our father Isaac. For being not yet born, neither having done anything good or bad, for the purpose of Yahweh according to the election, might stand, not of works, but of him who calls. It was said to her, the elder will serve the younger. Even it is written, Jacob I loved, and Esau I hated. What should we say then? Is there righteousness with Yahweh? Is there unrighteousness with Yahweh? We're going to make sure I get that straight. May it never be. Well, I would suggest that if you don't understand what Paul is really trying to get across, is to read some of the commentaries that you might find on verses 9 through 13. And those commentaries can do a better job of explaining some of this than I can in this particular area here. But verse 15 says, for he said to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. You can find a reference to that in Exodus 33, verse 19. I'm not going to go there. In verse 16 it says, so then it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but of Yahweh, which has mercy, who has mercy. So I believe that Paul really is simply saying here that Yahweh's in control of things. He does things his way, not our way. Verse 17, for the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I caused you to be raised up, that I might show in you my power, and that my name might be proclaimed in the earth. So, considering that, just let me digress just a minute here and say that, there's so much to say when it comes to the name of Yahweh. And what it's called, for instance, like in what they call the Lord's Prayer, it's in Luke 11, verse 2. It starts out with the words, our Father, who art in heaven, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. So, years ago, I asked myself, the question when we were studying this, what is it? What is his name? Because I really didn't know. I had heard some, people say things, but I wasn't sure. We did a study on it. But most likely, it's pronounced and found in Psalm 68, verse 4 in the King James Version. but it's actually spelled wrong. They spell it J-A-H. Well, there wasn't any J in the language, and the idea of his name being Jah just doesn't make any sense. So I went to the 1611 version of the Bible, and you have a copy of that or whatever can get to it, you can look at it. It's spelled I-A-H. Yah. Okay. It's pronounced Yah. In Revelation chapter 19, we read the words that are written, Hallelujah, 4 times actually. And we know that there was no J in the Hebrew or in the Greek. I'm saying this to this congregation here who knows all this already. But for those on the outreach and whatnot, they may not really understand this. So there wasn't any J in Hebrew, there wasn't any J in Greek or English before the year 1611, obviously, when the 1611 version of the Bible, King James, came out. That's all I want to say on that. So I'll go to verse 18 now. So then he has mercy on whom he desires, and he hardens whom he desires. In other words, Yahweh's will is not necessarily our will. He does things his way. In verse 19, and you will say then to me, why does he still find fault? For who withstands his will? But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against Yahweh? Will the thing formed ask of him who formed it, why did you make me this like this? And this goes for all of us human beings. You know, this is one of the great mysteries, you know, that Matthew 2:24, it says, for many are called and few are chosen. It's his will. It's not our will how things are done. And, you know, we just, it is what it is when it comes to the Father and his will. Verse 21, or has not the potter a right over the clay from the same lump to make one part a vessel of honor and another of dishonor? And this next verse I'm about to read might be a hard saying for some readers. It says, what if Yahweh, willing to show his wrath, to make his power known, endured with much patience vessels of wrath, made for destruction, people made to die, to be destroyed, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. And then you use it, verse 24, to us, whom he also called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles. As he says also in Hosea, I will call them my people, which are not my people, and her beloved, who was not beloved. It will be that in the place where I said to them, you are not my people, there will be called the children of the living Elohim, living God, the living Elohim. That's out of Hosea 1 verse 10. Hosea 1 verse 10. So, you know, can you capture the gravity of what we just read up here? And this is what Paul is saying. That we find it in 1 John 3 verse 1, where he wrote, behold how great a love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the children of Yahweh. For this cause the world does not know us, because it did not know him. But then he goes on to say, beloved, now are we the children of Yahweh, and it is not yet revealed what we will be, but we know that when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is, which is totally amazing. Just think about that a minute. You know, what is Joshua like right now? Well, he said this in Revelation 3 verse 21. John wrote it down. It says that he who overcomes, I will give him to sit down with me in my throne, and I also have overcome and sat down with my Father in His throne. So imagine yourself sitting in the same throne with both Yahshua and the Father, Yahweh. Sitting there at the same time. I mean, what a vision. And also, I want to make the comment that Yahweh it's a family name. It's that we can and will be born into that family, born a second time into the family of Yahweh. And believe me, that is the gospel. If there ever was good news, that's it. So let me continue on. Verse 27. Isaiah cries concerning Israel, if the number of the children of Israel are as the sand of the sea, visualize that, and it is the remnant who will be saved. Well, that's mentioned in Matthew 22 verse 14. For many are called, and few are chosen. For he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because Yahweh will make a short work upon the earth. And of course, he's speaking of the end times, and we may be seeing some of that before too long. In Matthew 24:22, it says, unless those days be shortened, no flesh will be saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, or the elect, those days will be shortened. And the idea that, we just started some action here this past week over in the Ukraine. And there's all kinds of talk about all kinds of things going on, from nuclear weapons to, trying to think of the right word, viruses, you might say. In other words, things that can hurt people badly, and lots of them. They want to reduce the population of this earth as part of Agenda 21. And we might be seeing some of this as we go along. The idea is that we can't be afraid of it, just have to deal with it. Kind of a hard thing to think about, but we're just going to have to live through it. Verse 29. As Isaiah said before, unless Yahweh of hosts had left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom and would have been like Gomorrah. Or in other words, no person would be able to survive. Everybody on this planet would die. It's kind of hard to grasp the idea that we might have the capability for all humanity to be wiped out. I think about some of the things that I've heard and read lately, in the last year or so. But apparently we've got some really nasty things that mankind can do to mankind. And apparently they can create diseases that can wipe us out. I don't know. That plus the nuclear weapons that we have, all of the things that man has created. It just gets worse and worse, as it was in the days of Noah. What comes to my mind. So what should we say then? That the Gentiles who did not follow after righteousness attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith. And faith is a major item that Paul talks about in both Romans and Galatians. So this term is an all-inclusive, meaning faith and works, because righteousness is obedience to the commandments. All of them all of these that apply, that have to do, where there's no temple, there's no sacrifices or Levitical priesthood, but the commandments are still they're still required, they're still a requirement. And that is, the core of righteousness is the commandments. Verse 31, but Israel, following after a law of righteousness, did not arrive at the law of righteousness. They didn't make it. Why? Because they did not seek it by faith, but as it were by works of the law. They stumbled over the stumbling stone, which would be Joshua, of course. Even as is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, and no one who believes in him will be disappointed. But they didn't even know about him prior to his birth. And even then they rebelled against him. So that's the last line of Romans chapter 9. But before we move to chapter 10, what we just read is the difference between what the Christian community says about the law, the Torah, and salvation by faith. Faith in Yahshua alone. Not only that, with loving Yahweh and our neighbor as ourselves, that's half right. But being half right won't save us. Salvation requires two things. It requires righteousness and faith. But what is righteousness? The answer is in Psalm 119:86. For all of your commandments are faithful. In verse 151 in 119. And your commandments are true. And then verse 172, for all your commandments are righteousness. So Paul's in agreement that keeping the law of Yahweh are required for salvation. No Torah, no salvation. At least in the age to come. So anyway, let's go ahead and start on Romans chapter 10. Somebody have something? Yes, Robert.
Yeah, Bob, you made a note when you were speaking concerning verses 6 and 7 in Romans 9, when it says, for not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel, or you made a note, and I thought you were going to go back to comment on that.
Right. It's going to come up much later.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so all right, verse 1 of chapter 10. Brothers, my heart's desire and my prayer to Yahweh for Israel, that they may be saved. Paul was a Jew, and he was obviously pulling real strong for his own kindred. He says, for I testify about them that they have a zeal for Yahweh, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of Yahweh's righteousness and seeking to establish their own righteousness, that was one of their faults, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of Yahweh. Paul had a lot of insight that's really hard for some of us to see through, I think. But anyway, the man he's just brilliant. So if you didn't understand what Paul said, you have to read that again. We went over this, last time in Romans 8 verse 14. I'm not going to go there. But anyway, let's just pick it up in verse 4 here. For Messiah is the fulfillment of the law, of the Torah, for righteousness to everyone who believes. Now that's pretty simple. Joshua, he did not in any way, shape, or form come to eliminate the Torah. He fulfilled the Torah. The laws of Yahweh are written in stone. They're not written on a chalkboard where you can take an eraser. So anyway, I see a head sticking out over here. David.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on verses 3 and 4, kind of putting those together in a more simpler form. Basically, how I read that and understand it is, instead of them taking Yahweh's law and using that to establish righteousness, Pharisees and Sadducees, they created their own law. and the laws was
They
much
added
more
to
of a
it.
burden on the people as opposed to the traditional law from Yahweh. And then in the same vein, he comes back and says that Messiah was the completion of the law for righteousness. So
Yeah.
not only did they create their own laws on top of Yahweh's laws, they rejected
They
Messiah.
they
which was the
rejected that
completion
law.
of that same law that they rejected.
Right. That's it. Robert's got his hand up again.
Yeah, and it's, as the word is translated and, but its goal, telos, is not a termination, but the goal of the law is to bring us to Messiah. And so when people think in the end, it's like the law's been done away or ended, whereas no, it brings us to a goal, which is to Messiah.
Yeah. Messiah,
in us, and we, yeah.
Joshua is added to the law. It's not, that there's nothing's happened to the law. Well, yeah, there's some changes because of him. I mean, and then there's no temple and no Levitical priesthood any longer. And so, but he is the end of the law. He's added portion.
Oh, he's
The law itself is that obedience, nobody can keep it ultimately, and so, you mess up once, you're gonna die. But because of Joshua, there is a method of salvation. And it's greater than anything most people can even imagine, to be like him. Verse 5, for Moses writes about the righteousness of the law. The one who does them will live by them. Pretty simple. But as we've already learned, it's virtually worthless without faith, because that's what Paul is writing so much about here, which is, is what he's trying to get across. And Christianity can't seem to comprehend that fact, that the law is perpetual. Faith is something that comes from within a person. In other words, faith is not something that's written with words. It's something that a person has. They do. They have to have faith. The law is the mechanical part, if you will, and faith is the spiritual part. That's what I'm really trying to get across. Both of these are required, and it's really that simple. It's not complicated. Verse 6, but the righteousness which is of faith says this, do not say, starts with, do not say in your heart, who will ascend to heaven? That is to bring Messiah down, or who will descend into the abyss? That is to bring Messiah up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith. You just add that to your obedience, which we proclaim. And the emphasis is on the word faith, of course. That if you will confess with your mouth that Yahshua is master, and believe in your heart that Yahweh has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Now, that verse right here is most often just kind of plucked out of context. You've got to put all this into context. It's not a standalone doctrine, a false doctrine at that. So when you confess this with your mouth, in other words, you are saying that you believe in the Messiah. You believe in Yahshua himself, and the works that he did, and the promises that he made. For with the heart, verse 10, for with the heart one believes unto righteousness. You get that? For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. In other words, it comes from within us. It's not part of the law. In no way does this mean that Paul is saying that the commandments of Yahweh are no longer necessary, a necessary requirement, because obedience to the commandments is the definition of righteousness. And with your mouth, you confess your faith. You see how that works? Pretty simple. Hey, Kurt.
Joshua made it plain in Matthew 5:17 through 19 that he didn't come to change the law.
Yes, I'm going, we'll hit that.
Okay.
If I haven't already. No, I guess, I don't recall. Okay, but yeah, that's right. You didn't change anything like that.
But there is a little passage in Daniel that talks about a very naughty character who will claim to change the law.
Well,
Very naughty character in Daniel 7:25. He's gonna think that, he's gonna think to change the law.
that's future yet.
It's been
Well,
both, it's been
Oh,
both past and
wait a minute,
future.
no, yeah, is, back in, year, what, 326, was it? Was it Council of Nicaea?
It happened a couple times
A
over
lot of that,
Nicaea.
yeah, so, yeah.
It happened at the time of Muhammad, and it's gonna happen again.
It's gonna happen again.
And it's gonna be even nastier than those guys.
You're right. I agree with you, 100%. Verse 11, for the scripture says, whoever believes in him will not be disappointed. That's from Isaiah 49, verse 23. For there is no distinction between a Jew and a Greek, for the same master is master of all, and is rich to all who call upon him. You know, think, would any Jew convert of Paul's day believe that the law has been done away? Remember, what a lot of people don't realize when they read the Bible, especially the New Testament, they don't realize that there was a long time span before there was any real documents that came out. And to think that the Jewish followers, which were most of them during the time of Messiah, that they would think that the law would be done away, that there that part of it would disappear. I don't think so. For whoever will call on the name of Yahweh will be saved. Again, people often want to cherry pick that particular verse and, do away with all the rest of what Paul says. The words, the Lord, means Yahweh in verse 13. And so, just trying to cherry pick one verse and make an old doctrine out of it's not going to work. Verse 14, how then will we call on him whom we have not believed? And then how will we believe in him we have not heard? How will they hear without a preacher? Paul does a pretty good job. And how will they proclaim unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who proclaim the good news of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. But they did not all listen to the good news, for Isaiah says, and it's interesting, he always refers to Isaiah, it's really a powerful portion of actually the New Testament, written in long before it. So anyway, for Isaiah says, Master, who has believed our report? Well, I don't think we need to go back and read, 1 Peter 3:15, where it talks about, oh boy, my brain just went open. I wrote this down after something I had written the last time, and I can't bring the verse to mind. Somebody pull up 2 Peter 3:15. Oh yeah, just a second. Okay, just a minute here. Yeah. I messed up somewhere. Yeah, it's 2 Peter 3:15, not first. Bear with me just one second. Yes, this is where he's talking about, I feel really silly here. It's not a typo, is it? I guess it is.
That's Yeah, we can go
Never
on.
mind.
Yeah, we can continue.
Pardon? No, that's not it. It talks about Paul's writings, basically, that, you know,
Verse
what Paul was
16.
trying to get across.
3:16.
It's 16, not 15.
Yeah, oh, is that it? Oh, sure enough, there it is right there. So anyway, yeah, in all of his epistles, speaking of them, these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, in which they are unlearned, unstable, and they rest. And they also, you know, the other scriptures to their own destruction. In other words, when people read some of the stuff from Paul's writings, they don't understand because they just, their mind is not open to understand what he's talking about. So what Paul says next about faith, you know, about the word of Yahweh is it's timeless. It stands forever. So Romans 10 verse 17. So faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Yahweh. Well, where is the word of Yahweh found? Well, it's found in the Old Testament. Yahweh did not speak himself in the New Testament. That was Yahshua. The words of Yahweh are found in the Old Testament, called the Scriptures, and that's you know, that's all the early church had, was the Scriptures. But all right, verse 18. But I say, did not they hear? Yes, most certainly. Their sound went out into the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. But I ask, did not Israel know? First, Moses says, I will provoke you to jealousy with that which is no nation. And with a nation void of understanding, I will make you angry. Isaiah is very bold and says, I found by those who did not seek me, you know, about the ones that did not ask for Yahweh. Or the Gentiles. The Gentiles were not Yahweh's chosen people. But now that they believe and obey are grafted in to Israel. The Israel of Yahweh. But as to Israel, he says, all day long I stretched out my hands to a disobedient and a contrite people. And I think this points, you know, where we're really getting a handle on understanding what Paul's saying in his letter to the Romans. Okay, Romans 11. I asked then, did Yahweh reject his people? I want to remind people that when Paul wrote this, there were no chapters and verses. This was a letter, and it was all read at one time. So we're picking it apart with these chapters and these verses. So anyway. So I asked, did Yahweh reject his people? May it never be. For I also am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. And also he was a Jew that he killed a lot of the followers of Yahshua. Before he was blinded on the road to Damascus, this guy was a bad man. Verse 2. Yahweh did not reject his people, which he foreknew. Or did you not know that what the scripture says about Elijah, how he pleads with Yahweh against Israel? Quotation, Master, they have all killed your prophets, and they have broken down your altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. That's out of 1 Kings 19, verse 10. But how does Yahweh answer him? I have reserved, this is the quotation back, I have reserved for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Even so then, at this present time, also there is a remnant, according to the election of grace. And if by grace it is no longer of works. Otherwise grace would no longer be grace. But if it is of works, it is no longer grace. Otherwise, works is no longer work. Yahshua plainly stated that if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. It was Matthew 19, verse 17. We can be justified because no one keeps the commandments perfectly, especially in this modern age. But it's not a license to disobey. Verse 7, what then? That which is Israel seeks for, that which Israel seeks for, that he did not obtain. But the chosen ones obtained it, and the rest were hardened. According as it is written, Yahweh gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that they should not see, ears that they should not hear, to this very day. And I want to underline that, to this very day. That's exactly what's happening now. We're very privileged to be able to understand just what we're reading here. I have a note here, Matthew 13:13, where he says, therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, neither do they understand. It still holds that way. In them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, by their hearing you will hear, and will not understand, and seeing you will see, and you will in no way perceive. For this people's heart is grown callous. They don't want to keep the commandments. It's too inconvenient. Their ears are dull of hearing. They can read this and cannot understand it. They have closed their eyes, or else perhaps they might perceive with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, that's the key to it, and should turn again, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. That is so amazing. Jumping back to verse 9. David says, let their table be made a snare and a trap of stumbling, a stumbling block and a retribution to them. Let their eyes be darkened that they may not see. Bow down their neck always. Ask then, did they stumble that they might, he asked then, did they stumble that they might fall? May it never be. But by their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles, to provoke them, that is the Jews, to jealousy. Now if their fall is the riches of the world, and their loss the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you who are Gentiles. Since then, I am an emissary to the Gentiles. I glorify my ministry. Boy, the way he writes, it is somewhat, it's kind of a little hard to understand. He's a very, very educated writer, but it's just someone that's just picked this up for the first time. I can understand why it's difficult for them to read unless they know more about the Bible. And quite frankly, I recommend if somebody's going to start to study the Bible, that they leave Paul alone until they read most of the rest of the Bible, because he can be a real trap for a lot of believers, or people that want to be believers. They may believe in the Messiah and all that sort of thing, but as far as the nuts and bolts are concerned, Paul can really mess it up if you don't understand it, and especially if you have some preacher that's preaching a false doctrine, my opinion. Okay, verse 14. If by any means I would provoke to jealousy those who are of my flesh, in other words, the Jews, and may save some of them. For if rejection of them is the reconciling of the world, what would their acceptance be but life from the dead? They kept the law, sometimes to the extreme, quite often they did, but they did not have faith at all in Yahshua. their Messiah that they ended up killing. If the first fruit is holy, so is the lump. If the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a Gentile, being wild olive, were grafted in among them, and became a partaker with them of the root and of the richness of the olive tree, do not boast over your branches. But if you boast, it is not to you who support the root, but the root supports you. In other words, to the Jew first, he's speaking about them as being the root. Will you say then the branches are broken off, that I might be grafted in? True, by their unbelief, they were broken off. And you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear. For if Yahweh did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. So there's a warning. See then the goodness and severity of Yahweh toward those who fell severely, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise you will be cut off. And what is the goodness? That's obedience to Yahweh. And that goes for all believers. There's no such thing as once saved, always saved. You've got to continue in it. I hope I'm making sense with this. They also, verse 23, they also, if they, the Jews that is, do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in. For Yahweh is able to graft them in again. So there's still great hope for them, for those that are of the tribes of Israel. Repentance is the same, both for Jews and Gentiles. It works the same, exactly. If you're a Jewish convert, if you're a Gentile convert, if you've never been a convert, it works the same way. For if you were cut out of that which is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more will these which are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? So, Paul is continually appealing to the Jews, those of his ilk, you might say. And he's done a pretty good job of it here. For I do not desire that you be ignorant, brothers, of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own conceits, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. We have to keep in mind that in this letter, he's writing to these people he's never seen before, and he knows that some of them are out of the Jewish faith, others are Gentile converts, and so he's trying to make this as plain as he possibly can to them. And we're reading about, how it all went down. Verse 26, and also all Israel will be saved. Now that's an interesting comment. All Israel will be saved, even it is written, there will come out of Zion the deliverer, and he will turn away unrighteousness from Jacob. And as best I can tell, that this would likely happen for all Israel at the future second resurrection, after the 1,000-year kingdom. I've thought about this a lot. How it says here, I want to repeat this again. There will come out of Zion a deliverer, and he will turn away all unrighteousness from Jacob. So, looking into the future, when is this going to take place? These people are all dead. So, I don't see any other time for this to take place other than the second resurrection. after the 1,000-year kingdom, when the rest of the dead, Revelation 20 verse 5, are resurrected back to physical life. And that's described over in Ezekiel chapter 37. Anybody got any comments on that? That's what made sense to me when I read this.
So you're saying that's when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in?
No, the rest of Israel. I mean, these people are all dead. You know, there's very few alive today by comparison. And so somewhere along the way, they're going to be grafted in. And they're going to be eligible for that, you know, for the resurrection of the dead to spirit life. Somewhere along the way, it appears, the way this reads. Curtis, say something.
Yes, check out Ezekiel 37.
Yeah.
Valley of the dry bones.
Yeah.
Let's pick it up in verse 12. Therefore, at this point where I'm gonna pick up, he's done all the putting together the bones and the flesh and all. Now he says, pick it up in verse 12. Therefore prophesy saying unto them, behold, says Adonai Yahweh, behold my people, and I will open up your graves, and I will cause you to come up out of your grave, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. And then you will know that I am Yahweh, when I have opened up your graves, all my people, and have brought you up out of your graves. And I will put my spirit into you, and you will live. And I shall place you in your own land, and you shall know that I am Yahweh, have spoken it, and I have performed it, says Yahweh.
What time element would that take place? That's what I'm really getting
Well, what
at.
the prophecy says, he would raise them up, and he would give them life, and he would put them in their own land.
Would that happen in the millennium? Would that have to happen after the 1,000 years?
Both.
I don't know. Well, I mean, it's a resurrection. The rest of the dead live not again until 1,000 years is finished.
But there's two resurrections, so it's both. He's gonna raise up, Yahshua will raise his people at his coming, but they will be given spiritual bodies.
The firstborn of the resurrection.
Yeah, but the Jews that were, you know, that had no understanding at all.
Second resurrection, you will put flesh on them, and
Yeah.
you will raise everyone else,
Yeah.
Gentiles and Israel.
That's right, they will.
So you got-
They're gonna be flesh.
You're asking which one is it, but the same thing will happen in both. The only difference is the spiritual bodies will not see death again. Those that are raised in the second have a possibility of being judged and
Yes,
seeing death.
yes, that's right. So was that gonna take place before the millennium or after? That's the question I'm asking. It's just a simple question, really.
The physical body,
Yeah, these physical bodies that we're reading here.
It said they would be placed in their own land.
well, he's
In their
gonna
own
place them
land,
in their
too.
own land twice.
I don't know, it's one of those things that keeps recurring in my head.
Yeah.
As you well know, that there's this all has gotta happen indecently and in order.
So when Yahshua comes, Yahweh says he will bring all the people back from their captivity from the nations, he spread them into the land. And then also New Jerusalem will come down and it will dwell in the land. So therefore, when Yahweh comes, he will also do the same thing. He will bring all his people into the land.
The dead ones also? All these dead
The ones
people?
that are raised, that are separated from the sheep and the goats, the sheep will be brought into the land, yes.
In other words,
First resurrection.
the rest of the dead.
So I think what's happening is, we're trying to look at both of them at the same time. When you separate the two and understand both the two resurrections more in depth, then you see a clear picture of the differences between the two. And maybe you can answer the question from that point, or when you try to answer the same question of when will he bring them in the land? He'll do it both times. When will he raise the dead? He'll do it both times. And so it's hard to have a conversation about it when you're asking the general question that will happen during both. Do I got that wrong?
I don't know. I mean, there's two different opinions on this. And, I don't know, I know that
That's right.
there are others in the room who have heard both sides of this thing, and it's really hard for me to figure out, but it appears to me that, that all of these people here, it says, and so all Israel will be saved. All Israel. That means all of the 13 tribes, as far as I can tell, will be saved and will turn away unrighteousness from Jacob. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know. I don't decide this thing. But it's something that came to mind as I was reading
I
it.
mean, you
Can I
just
ask a
read it.
question?
Yeah.
Going back one verse in 25, it says, I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers. So are we now ignorant of the secret that he's hoping we're not to be ignorant of? Is there a connection between the fullness, the time of the fullness of the Gentiles and the time when all Israel shall be saved? Are they gonna be hard-hearted and hard-headed until all Israel is saved? Or until all the fullness of the Gentiles? I just wanna know, what is the fullness of the Gentiles? How do we know when that happens? Has it happened already? Is it yet to happen?
Robert?
The fullness of the Gentiles, I think that's the message that comes with Messiah Yahshua. And I think the fullness of the Gentiles is completed when Yahshua the Messiah comes, because those who are in Messiah, those the living and the dead in Messiah will receive their spirit bodies will change.
Okay,
I think it's coming in his coming, yes, the fullness of the Gentiles, because I think that speaks to the glad tidings, this message of salvation. And so,
Israel to
You pick it up.
I realize they really can't hear on the outreach
Yeah.
what's going on back there, but that's all right. You know, the fullness of the Gentiles, yeah, I have to ask myself also, when will that happen? So, the way I understand it, the 1,000-year, the millennial period, are people, the occupants of that particular time will be those that are resurrected to spirit on the one hand, and those that lived through the destruction, the day of Yahweh, the terrible times that are gonna come. The remnant that will move, you know, will live over into that period and will have children and grow and grow. But this thing about Revelation 20 verse 5, where it says the rest of the dead did not live until 1,000 years were finished, kind of leaves me wondering about the concept of more time after the 1,000 years. I don't know. I mean, there's quite a disagreement about whether that's possible or not. So I don't know. I know that people are going to be judged by their works, and that children that died, they haven't had any works. So I don't know. That's just my theory. But anyway, let's finish up here. I gotta hurry up and finish this. On verse 27 now. Okay, of Romans 11. This is my covenant to them, that I will take away their sins concerning the good news of the gospel, that are enemies for your sake. But concerning the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. For the gifts and the calling of Yahweh are irrevocable. For as you in time past were disobedient to Yahweh, but now have obtained mercy by their disobedience, even so also these have now been disobedient, that they might, by mercy shown to you, they may also obtain mercy. So these blinded Jews will have their minds open, and they will also have to repent, to worship Yahshua, the King. And I don't see that happening in this present age, because they're all dead, most of them. I don't know, we'll just have to see. Verse 32, for Yahweh has shut up all to disobedience, that he might have mercy on all. So I have to ask the question, when will this happen? When will this happen to all? In the millennium? Or the rest of the dead? will not live until 1,000 years is finished. We'll just have to see. Like I said, that's Ezekiel 37, with the valley of the dry bones. So, verse 33, O depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and the knowledge of Yahweh, how unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past tracing out. We don't know. For who has known the mind of Yahweh? Or who has been his counselor? Well, that's a good question. Or who has first given him, that would be Yahweh, and it will be repaid to him again. For, Romans, the last verse, for in him, that's Yahweh, and through him, and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. So, we can see that, just knowing the true names of both Yahweh and Yahshua make our understanding a lot more clear, when we know who is who in the Bible. And so, we'll just have to see how all this works out and what Paul has to say as we go along a little further. We're out of time right now, so we'll be back for another part in about a month. And with that, those on outreach, hang on. We'll be back in 1 hour at 3 o'clock, and we'll start up again in our main message.